My FIL sent me to a cheap rental while he booked my wife a 5-star luxury resort. I never thought I would be here telling this story, but after 5 years of relationship and 7 months of engagement to Emma, I needed to get something off my chest. We were always very dedicated to our relationship. We built a beautiful home together and planned our future with enthusiasm. The problem was never Emma. She always tried to manage the situation with her father, but it was wearing her down deeply. I feared the day she would have to choose between the two of us, something I didn't want to happen. Everything started to change drastically a month after we bought our house in Seattle. Emma's father claimed that he urgently needed to replace the roof of his residence, as there were leaks and mold spreading everywhere. The detail that no one expected: he had a considerable bank account, frequently spending it on sports cars, international trips, and investments in luxury real estate. However, when it came to basic maintenance of his own home, he always sought financial help from his daughter. Emma informed me that she would lend her father $25,000 to fix the roof problem, and I almost had a heart attack. I ended up reluctantly agreeing. After all, she assured him it would just be a temporary loan that he would pay off soon. We were still paying off my debt from engineering school and had a bigger mortgage than we owed. Her father mentioned to Emma that I would let her live in terrible conditions during the winter if she didn't help him. It was a low blow, but we ended up refinancing the house to cover the cost of premium materials. To this day we haven't seen a penny back, and soon after he bought a new Porsche, as if money had never been an issue. That was just the beginning of a long series of interferences in our lives. Every time she tried to talk to Emma about her father's behavior, she became emotionally upset, so she avoided the topic so as not to cause more stress. Maybe it was my mistake, allowing this pattern to set in from the beginning of our relationship. I didn't want to be the villain of the story, the son-in-law who takes his daughter away from her father, even when all the evidence showed that he was exploiting us financially. A year after the rooftop incident, Emma and I decided to plan our first European vacation together. She had never visited the continent, whereas I had lived in Barcelona during my undergraduate studies. We rented a cozy apartment for 2 weeks and organized personalized itineraries including museums and architectural attractions, as Emma loves art history. Everything was perfect until your father decided he also needed to see Europe and invited himself on our trip. I'm sure you can already imagine what happened next. I tried to reason with Emma, appealing to her rational side, explaining that this would be our first romantic vacation as a couple, but again the emotional side prevailed. Her father claimed that he always dreamed of traveling to Europe with his late wife, who had left 10 years ago, and this would be his opportunity to fulfill that dream with his daughter by his side. Flying economy class wasn't enough for him. He bought business class tickets for him and Emma, leaving me alone for the entire transatlantic flight. When we arrived, the apartment we had rented did not meet their standards. He booked suites at the W Barcelona Hotel, where he and Emma stayed, while I remained alone in the apartment we had planned to share. Each morning we arranged to meet for breakfast, but his father was never ready before 11 a.m., causing us to miss most of the guided tours we had booked in advance. The entire trip, I felt like an intruder, questioning why I had traveled to Barcelona to feel so alone. It was like our relationship was being purposely sabotaged at every opportunity, and I couldn't understand why Emma didn't realize this. We returned home, and I tried to overcome the frustration of the ruined vacation by focusing on the future. We started discussing our wedding plans. As my family lives far away and my father has health issues that prevent him from traveling, I suggested a simple ceremony at the registry office, followed by an elegant dinner with close friends and Emma's family. It seemed like the ideal solution for our situation: intimate, meaningful, and without unnecessary stress. You can imagine how Emma's father reacted to this proposal. He insisted that his only daughter's wedding needed to be a grand affair, with hundreds of guests and all the pomp he could display for his friends and co-workers. When I looked at the side of the room where my few guests would be, I felt a lump in my throat. I explained to Emma several times that I didn't want this extravagance, but her father was already planning everything, completely ignoring our opinions. Things got worse when Emma's father started demanding that we have dinner together 3 times a week. He made reservations at expensive restaurants for 6 p.m., knowing that I rarely made it out of the engineering office before 6:30 p.m. At first, Emma went to these dinners alone, but soon he started making comments about how inconsiderate I was for not making an effort to be on time to have dinner with them. I never minded the dinners themselves, but the nasty comments behind my back were starting to affect our relationship. A detail that changed everything happened when I managed to leave work early to surprise Emma and attend one of those family dinners. I drove like crazy down the interstate, arriving home at 5 p.m., something that had never happened before. Emma was overjoyed when she saw me arrive, and immediately called her father to inform him that I could join them for dinner. I was so excited that I ran to take a quick shower and get ready for the occasion. Emma mentioned on the phone that I would be ready in just 15 minutes and asked if her father could postpone the reservation. That's when everything turned upside down. He arrived at our house at 5:15 p.m. stating he was hungry and couldn't wait another second. Emma came into the room to ask if I could hurry up as her father was really impatient. I told her to go ahead and that I would meet them at the restaurant as soon as it was ready. When I arrived at the place, I discovered that the table was reserved for 2 people only. Emma's father claimed that it would be an inconvenience to other customers if we tried to accommodate a third person. He suggested that I wait at the bar while they ate dinner, promising that he would try to resolve the situation. I ordered a drink at the bar and watched the 2 of them chatting animatedly. No sign that they were trying to include me in the meal. After 15 minutes of humiliating waiting, I decided to go home. It was during the journey that reality finally hit me. Our relationship was being systematically sabotaged by a man who couldn't bear to share his daughter's attention with anyone. I got home, sat alone in the living room, and began to reflect on the last 5 years. All the patterns were clear now: the financial intrusions, the ruined trip, the over-the-top wedding I didn't want, the exclusive dinners. None of this was a coincidence or simple inconvenience. It was a deliberate strategy to distance myself from Emma and strengthen his control over her. The question that was going through my mind was, how much longer could I endure this situation? And more importantly, would Emma ever be able to set boundaries with her father? When Emma arrived home hours later, she looked haggard. He said he had argued with his father about what happened at the restaurant. For the first time, she mentioned that she was beginning to see patterns of his controlling behavior. We talked for hours that night, revisiting every uncomfortable episode from the past few years. It was a difficult but necessary conversation. We agreed that we needed time to process everything. I called my best friend, Colleen, who came to pick me up to spend the night at her house. Before leaving, Emma and I hugged each other for a long time. I told her I loved her, but that we needed to find a solution to this toxic family dynamic if we wanted to have a future together. The next day, I called my boss to ask for a few days off and bought a ticket to visit my parents in California. I needed distance and clarity to make important decisions about my future. I sent Emma a long email explaining my feelings and frustrations over the past few years. I shared how isolated I felt during our trip to Barcelona, how I was excluded from our own wedding plans, and how the constant dinner parties seemed designed to keep me away. It was the most difficult email I've ever written, but it was crucial that she fully understand my perspective before we made any decisions about our relationship. Emma responded almost immediately, asking to video chat that same evening. When we connected, her eyes were red from crying. She admitted that she always knew there was something wrong in her relationship with her father, but never had the courage to confront him or set clear boundaries. The restaurant incident had been an eye-opening moment for her, especially when her father commented that it was better if I wasn't there so they could talk about important family matters. During our video chat, Emma asked if I was sure I wanted to end our relationship. I responded that I was 90% convinced that this would be the best path, considering everything we had been through. Surprisingly, her eyes lit up with determination, and she said we would talk more when I got back. I agreed that I would not end our long-distance relationship and that we had many practical issues to resolve, such as the house and returning the deposits for the wedding that her father had planned but had not paid anything for. My father, who has always been my biggest supporter, offered to help me financially if I needed to buy out Emma's share of the house or look for a new place to live. This financial security gave me a feeling of freedom that I hadn't had in a long time. Now I could make decisions based on my feelings, not economic needs. Something completely unexpected happened when I returned to the city. Following a friend's advice, Emma decided she couldn't wait any longer to resolve our situation. When I arrived at the airport, there she was, holding a sign with my name and a determined look on her face that I hadn't seen in years. On the way home, she told me that she had confronted her father about his controlling and manipulative behavior. The conversation didn't end well, with him denying all the accusations and blaming me for pushing his daughter away. What Emma didn't know was that this pattern of behavior had started long before I came into her life. During my absence, she talked to her older sister, who had moved to another state precisely to escape her father's toxic influence. It was a revelation that completely changed her perspective on family dynamics. Emma and I decided to give our relationship a second chance, but with some significant changes. First, we temporarily suspended our engagement. We needed to rebuild our trust and partnership before thinking about marriage. Second, Emma canceled all the arrangements her father had made for the wedding without consulting either of us. Third, I started attending therapy regularly to process the last few years of manipulation and learn to set healthy boundaries. Emma accompanied me to a few sessions, which was extremely helpful for our communication. His father, unsurprisingly, refused to participate in any kind of family therapy, insisting that there was nothing wrong with his behavior. It was at that moment that Emma made a decision I never thought I'd see her make. She established that if her father wasn't willing to work on their relationship in a healthy way, she would drastically limit contact with him. We began to rediscover our relationship, as if we were getting to know each other again. We went out to dinner in places we had never been to, talked about topics we had previously avoided, and planned a future based solely on our wants and needs. It was like breathing fresh air after years of suffocating. Emma began to realize how much of her identity was tied to her father's expectations, and how this had affected her choices throughout her life. I, on the other hand, realized that I had allowed my desire to be accepted by his family to lead me to tolerate unacceptable situations. We both had a lot to learn and unlearn. Therapy was being fundamental in this process, helping us identify toxic patterns and replace them with healthier and more respectful interactions. Emma's father tried a desperate tactic to regain control of the situation. He faked a suicide attempt, calling emergency services before even taking any medication. It was a calculated maneuver to awaken guilt in Emma and make her return to her previous pattern of submission. This time, however, something had fundamentally changed in our dynamics. Emma recognized the manipulation for what it was and, instead of rushing to his aid, kept her emotional and physical distance. It was a defining moment for both of us, demonstrating that we were truly committed to change. My therapist helped me understand the depth of trauma that Emma's father's behavior had caused in our relationship. What had previously seemed like inconvenient intrusion was now clearly recognized as systematic emotional abuse. During therapy sessions, Emma revealed a crucial detail about her father that explained much of his behavior. When Emma's father had serious kidney problems, she donated one of her kidneys in an attempt to save him. Unfortunately, his body rejected the organ and he passed away a few months later. Throughout the grieving process, Emma's father manipulated her into believing that she was responsible for her husband's death. He said that if she had been a match, or if the procedure had been performed earlier, her husband would still be alive. It was an absurd guilt that he had implanted in Emma, using her as a tool of control for over a decade. Every time she tried to establish independence or build her own life, he reminded her of this failure to save her husband. It was a pattern of emotional abuse that had started long before I came into his life. When we finally understood the extent of the manipulation and psychological abuse, we made a definitive decision to completely cut off contact with Emma's father. It was not a decision taken lightly or impulsively. We tried to offer him the opportunity to participate in family therapy, to recognize his toxic patterns and work to change them. He refused all offers, preferring to remain the wronged victim. We changed the locks on our house, blocked her number on our phones, and instructed Emma's workplace not to allow her entry. He ended up moving to the same town where Emma's sister lived, likely hoping to manipulate her in the same way. However, she had also cut ties with him years before, precisely because of the same patterns of controlling behavior. As for the $25,000 for the roof, we decided to consider it lost. No amount of money was worth the emotional toll of maintaining any kind of contact or obligation with him. 6 months after we cut off contact with Emma's father, our relationship has blossomed in ways I never imagined possible. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted from our shoulders. We make decisions based solely on our wants and needs, without the constant shadow of disapproval or manipulation. We decided to resume our engagement, but on our own terms. We planned an intimate ceremony, with just our closest friends and Emma's distant family who were truly supportive. No unnecessary extravagance or guests we barely knew. It would be a genuine celebration of our love and commitment, not a spectacle to impress others. Emma was radiant as I had never seen her before, free to express her true desires without fear of disappointing or angering her father. I also felt different, more secure and confident in our relationship, without the constant feeling of being an intruder or competitor for my fiancé's attention. We decided to get married in September, in a small outdoor ceremony in the park where we had our first date. It was perfect in its simplicity and meaning. After the ceremony, we traveled to California to renew our vows at my parents' house, allowing my father to participate without compromising his health. It was an emotional time for all of us, especially as his health was deteriorating rapidly. My brother, who is a doctor, was not optimistic about his prognosis this time. We planned our honeymoon for the following January in Fiji, a tropical destination we had always dreamed of visiting together. Our life was finally on the right track, built on a foundation of mutual respect, open communication, and healthy boundaries. I still attended therapy regularly, now not so much to deal with past trauma but to ensure we continued to develop tools for a healthy relationship in the future. An important aspect of our healing journey was helping Emma properly process the death of her mother, who had passed away when she was a teenager. Her father had distorted this grief so much with his manipulations that Emma never had the opportunity to truly say goodbye and accept the loss. With the guidance of our therapist, we arranged a small private ceremony to honor his mother's memory. It was a deeply emotional and healing moment for Emma, allowing her to connect with her memories without her father's toxic interference. For me, it was a privilege to witness this part of her journey and support her as she reconnected with a part of her identity that had been suppressed for so long. Our relationship deepened through these shared experiences, creating a bond stronger than we had ever known. Through therapy, Emma also began to process her feelings regarding the kidney donation that didn't save her husband. For years, he carried an unfair guilt, carefully implanted by his father. Our therapist worked with her to understand that her act had been an extraordinary act of love, not a failure. No doctor could guarantee the success of a transplant, and the rejection of the organ had absolutely nothing to do with Emma or her actions. Seeing my wife finally free herself from this emotional burden was one of the most rewarding experiences of our journey together. She began to talk about the issue without the burden of guilt, recognizing her courage and selflessness rather than the failure her father had built up. It was a profound transformation that impacted every aspect of his life and, consequently, our relationship. As we approach our first wedding anniversary, we reflect on the incredible journey we've been on. From a relationship almost destroyed by toxic manipulation and control, we emerged stronger and more united than ever. The decision to cut off contact with Emma's father had been painful at the time, but it had proven to be absolutely necessary for our mental health and the survival of our relationship. Emma occasionally expressed sadness over the loss of the possibility of a healthy relationship with her father, but never regret for the decision we made. We understand that some people are unwilling or unable to change toxic patterns of behavior, and that true love sometimes means setting firm boundaries, even when they are painful. The important thing was that we were building our own legacy of love and respect, breaking cycles of abuse that could have continued for generations. Our story does not end with an easy victory or a perfect solution. There are still difficult days, moments of doubt, and occasionally the ghost of past manipulations appears in our thoughts. The difference is that we now have the tools to recognize these patterns and work together to overcome them. Emma learned to identify the emotional triggers implanted by years of manipulation, and I developed greater sensitivity to her needs during these vulnerable moments. We build a partnership based on mutual understanding, honest communication, and an unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. If there's one lesson we've learned through all of this, it's that true love isn't just about happy, romantic moments, but about growing together through adversity, supporting each other when times get tough. One of the most significant parts of our healing journey was the decision to hold a mourning ceremony for Emma's father, not for the man he became, but for the father she needed and never had. Our therapist suggested that this ritual could help Emma process her complex feelings and finally move on. We planned a little get-together in our garden, where Emma wrote a letter expressing everything she would have liked to have said to her father if he had been able to listen and respond with genuine love. It was a powerful moment of liberation when she read those words out loud and then burned the letter, symbolizing her final release from that toxic relationship. Friends who had gone through similar experiences of family separation shared their own journeys, creating a space of mutual understanding and support. It was as if a final chapter was being closed, allowing a new one to begin without the weight of the past. Over time, we discovered that we were not alone in our experiences. Through support groups and online communities, we met dozens of people who had experienced similar situations with narcissistic, controlling parents. These connections were incredibly valuable, offering both validation and practical strategies to continue our healing journey. Emma began to actively participate in these groups, eventually becoming a mentor to others who were just beginning to recognize toxic patterns in their own family relationships. Seeing my wife turn her pain into support for others was deeply inspiring and highlighted how much she had grown. What was once a source of shame and confusion became a foundation of wisdom and empathy that she could share with those going through similar situations. It was as if the whole painful experience finally found a greater purpose. An unexpected revelation came when Emma began going through old family photos and documents. He discovered that his father had manipulated not only his feelings, but also concrete information about his family heritage. Properties that should have been divided between her and her sister were secretly transferred solely into his name after her mother's death. Although monetary value was not our primary concern, the discovery confirmed the pattern of manipulation that extended to all areas of his life. We consulted a lawyer about the possibility of recovering what legitimately belonged to the sisters, but decided not to pursue legal action. The emotional cost of reopening this chapter would be very high, and we both agreed that our peace of mind was worth more than any material inheritance. Instead, we documented everything carefully and archived the information in case your sister decided to take action in the future. As we approached our honeymoon in Fiji, we received news that Emma's father had tried to contact her sister, claiming to be ill and in need of care. It was the same pattern of emotional manipulation we knew so well. Emma's sister steadfastly maintained her boundaries, offering to connect him with appropriate health services but refusing to be drawn back into the toxic relationship. It was a proud moment for Emma to see her sister demonstrate such strength and clarity. The toxic patterns that had controlled their lives for so long were losing their power, one generation at a time. We discussed how important it would be to pass these lessons on to our future children, teaching them from an early age about healthy boundaries, mutual respect, and unconditional love without manipulation or control. Our honeymoon in Fiji was everything we dreamed of and more. For the first time, we travel without the shadow of interference or manipulation. Every decision, from where to dine to what activities to do, was ours alone. The freedom was intoxicating. We spent days exploring coral reefs, hiking lush trails, and simply enjoying each other's company without distractions or tension. One night, sitting on the beach under a starry sky, Emma commented how strange it was to no longer feel that constant anxiety that accompanied her in every moment of happiness. Before, I always waited for something or someone to appear and ruin the special moments. Now, I could finally be present and fully enjoy the life we had built together. It was perhaps the greatest gift our journey has given us, the ability to live fully in the present, without fear of the past or anxiety about the future. When we returned home, we discovered that Emma was pregnant. It was a wonderful surprise that brought a new dimension to our commitment to keeping our family environment healthy and loving. The news made us reflect even more deeply on the standards we wanted to break and the new ones we wanted to establish. Our therapist helped us develop strategies to create an emotionally safe environment for our son, based on open communication, mutual respect, and clear, healthy boundaries. The prospect of becoming parents brought both joy and responsibility, and we were determined to offer the next generation what Emma didn't have, a home where love doesn't come with conditions or manipulation. We began planning the baby's room, each detail chosen with care and intention, physical symbols of the emotional environment we were committed to creating. It was the beginning of a new chapter in our story, one we were writing on our own